I'm Leo Miller. I'm 34 years old, and my own parents sued me for $350,000 for the crime of refusing to pay my older brother's mortgage. Before I tell you about the one question the judge asked that blew their entire case apart in front of everyone, do me a quick favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. It all started on a Tuesday, a completely unremarkable gray sky Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from work, my mind still debugging a stubborn piece of code, and was sorting through the mail on my kitchen counter. Bills, junk mail, a coupon for a pizza place I never order from. And then I saw it. A thick 9x12 manila envelope. Felt heavy, official. My name and address were typed out. No return address, just a postmark from the city courthouse. My heart gave a little thump. Jury duty? A traffic ticket I'd forgotten about? I slid it open with my thumb, my stomach tightening for reasons I couldn't yet explain. Inside, a sheaf of papers was held together by a thick metal clip. The top page had a seal, and bold letters that screamed at me from across the room. Civil summons. I felt a cold dread wash over me. I've never been in trouble. I pay my taxes, I drive the speed limit. I'm the guy who returns his shopping cart to the little corral in the parking lot. Who on earth would be suing me? I scanned the document, my eyes jumping around the dense legal text. Plaintiff, defendant. My eyes landed on my name next to defendant. Then I looked up to see who the plaintiff was. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a corporation or some disgruntled client. The names listed were George Miller and Helen Miller. My father and my mother. I had to read it 3 times to believe it. My hands started to shake, the papers trembling. It wasn't a mistake. There it was in black and white. Amount of claim, $350,000. Reason for lawsuit, reimbursement for financial and emotional support provided during upbringing. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the papers rattling against the granite countertop. Felt like a punch to the gut, like the air had been sucked out of the room. $350,000. For raising me. It was absurd. It was insane. It was them. It was so perfectly them. And as I sat there, under the hum of the refrigerator, staring at the legal declaration of war from my own parents, my mind didn't flash to a lawyer or a defense. It flashed to a moment, standing in the middle of a packed courtroom, the judge peering down at me over her spectacles, just before she delivered a verdict that would change everything. To understand how I ended up there, facing the very people who brought me into this world, we have to go back 6 months. Back to the day my brother, the golden child, lost everything. To understand my family, you have to understand the dynamic between me and my older brother, Ethan. It wasn't a rivalry, because a rivalry implies that both sides are actually competing. In our family, the winner was declared before the game even started. Ethan was the golden child, the firstborn, the one who could do no wrong. I was the other one, the responsible one, the quiet one. Ethan was the sun. I was the planet that quietly orbited him, useful for my gravitational pull but never the center of the solar system. He was charming, popular, and had a way of making everything look easy. He got the lead in the school play, he was the quarterback for a season, and every one of his achievements was framed and mounted on the living room wall. My report cards, with their straight A's, were glanced at, given a nod of approval, and then placed in a drawer. "That's nice, Leo," my mom would say, before turning back to a story about Ethan's latest social conquest. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to get it myself. I'll never forget when I was 12. I wanted a new bike more than anything. Not just any bike, a specific 10-speed I'd seen in a catalog. I did chores for neighbors all summer. Mowing lawns, pulling weeds, walking dogs. I saved every single dollar in a shoebox under my bed. The day I finally had enough, I walked to the bike shop, cash in hand, and bought it myself. I was so proud. I could barely stand it. I rode it home, beaming, and parked it in the garage next to Ethan's perfectly good, but slightly older, bike. The next weekend, Ethan decided he wanted a new bike too. He didn't save. He didn't work. He just mentioned it to my dad at dinner. On Saturday, my dad came home with a brand new, top-of-the-line mountain bike strapped to the roof of his car. It was twice as expensive as mine. When I asked my mom why, she just ruffled my hair and said, "Oh, honey, you're so good at saving. Ethan just isn't. We have to help him out a little." That was the logic I grew up with. My independence wasn't seen as a strength. It was seen as a reason to ignore me. My responsible nature meant I didn't need their help, so they were free to pour all their resources, time, money, attention, into Ethan. I put myself through college with a combination of scholarships and student loans, working part-time jobs the entire time. They paid for Ethan's state university tuition, of course. When my car broke down, I learned how to fix it from YouTube videos. When Ethan got a flat tire, he called Dad, who would drop everything to come and change it for him. I built a successful career as a software engineer. I was careful with my money, maxing out my 401k, building up a healthy savings account, and paying off my college loans years ahead of schedule. I didn't have debts. I had a plan. My parents saw my financial stability not as something to be proud of, but as a resource. A family resource that was just sitting there waiting to be tapped. And for years, that's how it was. A quiet, simmering imbalance. I loved my brother, I really did, but I existed in his shadow. I accepted it as the price of peace in the family. I didn't know that the price was about to go up. Way up. Because the sun, the center of our family's universe, was about to implode. Ethan's perfect life began to unravel on a rainy Wednesday in April. He had it all, or so it seemed. A beautiful wife, Sarah, 2 great kids, Liam and Noah, a management position at a respectable company, and a nice suburban house with a 2-car garage. He was living the dream my parents had always envisioned for him. The first crack appeared when his wife, Sarah, found the text messages. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a full-blown affair he'd been carrying on for months with a woman from his office. Sarah was devastated, but she wasn't weak. The discovery didn't just break her heart. It broke the spell Ethan had on everyone. Within a week, she had filed for divorce. The fallout was brutal and swift. Ethan, who had never faced a real consequence in his life, was completely unprepared. He thought he could charm his way out of it, but Sarah was done. The divorce was messy. In their state, infidelity could impact the division of assets, and Sarah's lawyer was sharp. Ethan lost a significant portion of their shared assets. The house had to be sold. He suddenly found himself living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, trying to navigate a shared custody agreement he barely understood. As if that wasn't enough, the stress of the divorce bled into his work. His performance tanked. He was unfocused, irritable, and missed crucial deadlines. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, he was laid off. The golden boy had fallen, and he'd fallen hard. I was the first person he called, sobbing on the phone. "I've lost everything, Leo. Everything. And despite everything, despite the years of being second best, my heart went out to him. He was my brother. I saw his pain, and I saw his 2 young sons, my nephews, who were caught in the middle of this mess. So I did what I always did. I stepped up. I went over to his apartment that night. It was a disaster. Pizza boxes were stacked on the counter. Toys were scattered everywhere. And Ethan was sitting on the couch in a wrinkled shirt, staring at nothing. He looked broken. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "Sarah's lawyer was expensive. The rent here is insane. I have no job, no prospects. My unemployment isn't enough to cover child support and rent." I sat down next to him. "We'll figure it out," I told him. "You're not alone." I wish I could say my parents rushed in to save him, but their version of saving was different. They were great at providing emotional support for him. They'd call him multiple times a day, telling him how unfair it all was, how Sarah was being unreasonable, how his company had betrayed him. They were masters at validating his victimhood. But when it came to the practical, financial side of things, they were suddenly paralyzed. They had their own retirement to think about, they said. They were on a fixed income. So the burden, as it always did, fell silently onto my shoulders. I didn't wait to be asked. I knew he wouldn't ask, and my parents certainly wouldn't ask me directly. Not at first. That wasn't their style. Their style was to create a problem so large that I would feel obligated to solve it. But this time I decided to get ahead of it. I thought maybe if I help now without any fuss, they'll finally see me. They'll finally appreciate me. I was so naive. The first thing I did was handle the legal mess. Ethan's divorce attorney had a remaining balance on his retainer that needed to be paid off. Ethan was getting threatening letters. Without telling him, I called the law firm and settled the bill. $5,500. I just put it on my credit card and paid it off at the end of the month. It was a significant amount of money, but I figured it was a one-time cost to close a painful chapter. Next was his living situation. His apartment was in a decent school district for the kids, but the rent was steep. He was already a month behind. I knew an eviction would be the final nail in his coffin. So, I sat down and wrote a check to his landlord for 6 months' rent in advance. $7,200. I told Ethan it was a loan, but we both knew I would never ask for it back. I just wanted him to have some breathing room, a stable place for my nephews to come home to while he got back on his feet. My weekends changed, too. Before, they were my time to decompress, go hiking, or work on my own projects. Now, they belonged to my nephews. Every Friday, I'd pick up Liam and Noah from school. We'd go to the park, build elaborate Lego castles, and watch superhero movies. I'd make sure they did their homework and got a couple of home-cooked meals before I dropped them back at Ethan's on Sunday night. It gave Ethan a solid block of time to search for jobs, go on interviews, or just pull himself together. I was running on fumes, juggling my demanding job and my new role as a part-time parent. But I didn't complain. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And a small, hopeful part of me thought, this is it. This is the time they'll finally see what I do for this family. Couldn't have been more wrong. My help was so seamless, so quiet, that it became invisible. To my parents, the crisis was simply averted. Ethan had a place to live. His legal troubles were gone. The kids were cared for. They didn't ask how. They just saw the result. In their minds, things were stable, which meant they could go back to their favorite pastime, worrying about my life. I was at their house for dinner a few weeks later when my mom started in. "Leo, honey," she said, passing me the potatoes. "You're so good with the boys. It really makes me think. When are you going to settle down? You're not getting any younger." I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. "Mom, I'm happy with my life right now. I'm focusing on my career." My dad chimed in from the head of the table. "A career doesn't keep you warm at night, son. Look at your brother. Even with all his troubles, he has his boys. He has a family. What do you have? A nice apartment and a good salary? It's not the same." I just stared at them. I had just spent thousands of dollars and countless hours keeping their precious son's family afloat, and they were lecturing me about not having one of my own. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They didn't see my support as a sacrifice. They saw it as something they were entitled to, the natural function of the responsible, unmarried son. My contributions were expected. My personal life was a problem to be fixed. That dinner was a turning point. The hope I'd been clinging to finally fizzled out, replaced by a cold, hard resentment. I continued to help, but I did it for my nephews, not for them. I pulled back emotionally, keeping my conversations with my parents short and superficial. The peace lasted for about a month. And then, one evening, my phone rang. It was my mom, her voice syrupy sweet, a tone that always set my teeth on edge. "Leo, honey," she chirped, "we have such good news. Wonderful news for the whole family. Can you come by for dinner tonight? We want to tell you all about it." I should have known. That tone of voice, the manufactured excitement. It was the sound of a trap being set. But like a fool, I said yes. The drive to my parents' house was filled with a sense of unease. My mom's voice on the phone had been too bright, too cheerful. It was the voice she used when she was trying to sell an idea she knew you wouldn't like. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe they'd won the lottery or something. But the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan's car was already there. Of course, this was a family announcement, and in our family that meant it was about him. I walked in, and the scene in the living room was almost staged. My dad, George, sat in his usual armchair, looking serious and important. My mom, Helen, was perched on the edge of the sofa, practically vibrating with excitement. And next to her was Ethan, who had a look on his face I hadn't seen in months. A mixture of relief and smug entitlement. "Leo, you're here. Come, sit down," my mom exclaimed, patting the cushion next to Ethan. The air was thick with anticipation. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a corporate presentation about to begin. And sitting right in the middle of the coffee table, like a prop waiting for its cue, was a thick manila folder. The same kind of folder that would one day contain a lawsuit against me. I sat down cautiously, feeling like an outsider who had stumbled into a private meeting. "So, what's the good news?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My dad cleared his throat, leaning forward with his hands clasped. "Son, we've been very worried about Ethan and the boys. That apartment, it's no place to raise a family. They need stability, a backyard, a place to call home." I nodded slowly. "Okay." And my mom could barely contain herself. She reached over and tapped the manila folder. "Well, your father and I decided to do something about it. We found the most perfect little house for them. 3 bedrooms, a big yard for the boys to play in a great school district. It's perfect." Ethan finally spoke up, a wide grin spreading across his face. "It's incredible, Leo. You should see it. It even has a finished basement." I was confused. "That's great. But how? I thought you guys were on a fixed income, and Ethan's still looking for work." This was the moment. My dad picked up the folder and opened it on the coffee table, revealing a stack of official-looking documents. I could see words like mortgage agreement and promissory note. "We took care of the down payment," my dad said proudly, as if he'd just solved world peace. "Used a good chunk of our retirement savings. We see it as an investment in our grandchildren's future." I looked at the papers, then back at their expectant faces. Something still wasn't adding up. A down payment was one thing, but a mortgage was a 30-year commitment. There was no way Ethan could afford the monthly payments. There was no way my parents could. "I don't understand," I said, my voice quiet. "Who's going to pay the mortgage?" My mom smiled, a brilliant, terrifying smile, and placed her hand on my arm. Her touch felt like ice. "Well, that's the other part of the good news, honey," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We all know how well you're doing. You've been so responsible, you've saved so much money. We figured, it's time you helped the family in a bigger way." She slid a single document out from the stack and pushed it across the table toward me. It was a bank transfer authorization form. The monthly payment amount was circled in red ink. My name was already typed in the payer section. My heart didn't just sink. Plummeted. This wasn't good news. This wasn't a family meeting. It was an ambush. I stared at the paper on the coffee table, the numbers swimming in front of my eyes. The monthly payment was nearly $2,000. A 30-year mortgage. They weren't asking me to help out for a few months. They were shackling me to a financial obligation for the next 3 decades. For a house that wasn't mine. For a brother who had made his own bad choices. The silence in the room was deafening. They were all watching me, their faces radiating a serene, unshakable certainty that I would, of course, agree. To them, this was a perfectly logical solution. I had the money. Ethan had the need. The equation was simple. I finally found my voice, but it came out as a choked whisper. "You're joking, right? This has to be a joke." My dad's face hardened. The jovial patriarch disappeared, replaced by the stern disciplinarian I knew all too well. "There's nothing funny about this, Leo. This is about family. This is about responsibility." "Responsibility?" I shot back, my voice gaining strength. "I've been responsible. I've been paying for Ethan's mistakes for the last 6 months. His lawyer, his rent, his kids. What do you call that?" My mom waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "That was temporary, dear. This is about the future. About providing a stable home for your nephews." She was using my nephews against me. The ultimate emotional blackmail. "So your plan," I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. Was to buy a house you can't afford with a down payment from your retirement fund, and then just hand me the bill? Without even asking me first. We're asking you now, Ethan piped up, sounding genuinely confused as to why I wasn't thrilled. This is a good thing, Leo. It solves everything. It solves everything for you. I exploded, standing up from the couch. What about me? What about my future? My plans to buy my own house one day? My own college fund if I ever have kids? Did any of you think about that for 1 second? This is when my mom's eyes welled up with tears. It was a classic move, perfected over 30 years of emotional manipulation. How can you be so selfish? She whimpered. We raised you. We fed you, we clothed you. We gave you everything. Isn't it time you gave something back? The sheer audacity of that statement knocked the wind out of me. I had worked for everything I had. My education, my career, my savings. They hadn't given me everything. They had given everything to Ethan. My dad stood up, puffing out his chest. Your mother is right. And frankly, what do you need all that money for anyway? You don't have a wife. You don't have children. You have a great salary and no one to spend it on. Your brother has a family to support. That was it. That was the line. The moment all the years of resentment, of being overlooked and undervalued, coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a wallet, an emergency fund, a resource to be exploited for the benefit of their favored son. No, I said, my voice dangerously calm. This isn't help. This is manipulation. This is theft. And I will not be a part of it. I looked at my brother, who was staring at me with a look of pure betrayal, as if I were the one being unreasonable. I looked at my parents, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. They had genuinely believed this would work. They had never considered the possibility that I would say no. The answer is no, I repeated, turning toward the door. Figure it out yourselves. I walked out, slamming the door behind me so hard the windows rattled. I got in my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. And as I drove away, I didn't feel relief. I felt the ominous dread of a man who had just declared war. I half expected my phone to start ringing the second I pulled out of the driveway, but it didn't. The silence was almost worse. It was the eerie calm before a storm. I got home, my mind racing, my blood boiling. I paced my apartment for an hour, replaying the conversation, each word from my parents feeling like a fresh stab of betrayal. The storm broke the next morning. It didn't start with my parents. They were smarter than that. They outsourced the initial attack. The first call was from my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister. Leo, honey, she began, her voice dripping with fake, syrupy concern. Your mother called me. She's absolutely devastated. I just don't understand. How could you be so cruel to your own brother? I tried to explain. Aunt Carol, you don't understand the situation. They bought a house and expect me to pay for it for 30 years. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she clucked. It's just money. Ethan is a single dad now. He's been through so much. And you're sitting on all that money, with no family of your own to support. What else are you going to do with it? Your parents are just trying to secure the family's future. You should be grateful they included you. Grateful. She actually said I should be grateful. I felt my jaw tighten. This conversation is over, I said, and I hung up. Minutes later, a text message from my cousin, Jessica, Aunt Carol's daughter. A screenshot of a Facebook post she'd just made. It didn't mention my name, but it was clear who it was about. So sad when people get successful and forget where they came from. Some people would do anything for family, and others wouldn't lift a finger to help their own brother in his time of need. Hashtag family over everything, hashtag disappointed. I felt a surge of white-hot anger. They were making me the villain in a story they had written. It was a coordinated campaign. My parents had activated the family telephone tree, and their version of the story, that their poor, struggling son Ethan was being abandoned by his rich, selfish brother Leo, was spreading like wildfire. My phone buzzed again. An email from my Uncle Don. A long, rambling lecture about filial duty and the sacrifices parents make, and how it was my moral obligation to honor thy father and mother. It was a full-scale assault, coming from all sides. They were trying to shame me, guilt me, and pressure me into submission. Every buzz of my phone made me flinch. Each message was a new wave of condemnation from people who had only heard one side of the story, the side that painted me as a monster. But something inside me had snapped that night at my parents' house. The part of me that craved their approval, that would do anything for a scrap of validation, had died. The more they pushed, the harder my resolve became. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. It was about them believing they had the right to dictate my life, my finances, my future. I sat on my couch, my phone lighting up with notifications, and I made a decision. I went into my contacts list. Aunt Carol, block. Cousin Jessica, block. Uncle Don, block. I went through and systematically blocked every number of every extended family member who had ever sided with my parents, who had ever made me feel small or less than. Then I got to my parents and Ethan. I hesitated for a moment. This felt so final. But what other choice did I have? They had shown me exactly who they were. I took a deep breath and blocked them too. As the silence finally descended on my apartment, I felt a strange sense of peace. The war wasn't over, I knew that, but I had survived the first wave. I had drawn a line in the sand. I would not let them ruin my life. At the time, I thought that was the worst they could do. I thought a public shaming campaign was their ultimate weapon. I had no idea how wrong I was. Their desperation was about to lead them to do something I never, in my wildest nightmares, could have imagined. The 2 months that followed were strangely quiet. The silence from my family was a relief at first, like the blessed quiet after a loud, incessant noise is finally shut off. I focused on work, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and started to feel like myself again. I even started going on dates. I was building a life that was truly my own, free from the weight of my family's expectations. I heard through the grapevine, from my friend Daniel, who was still friends with one of my cousins on social media, that my parents had managed to get a mortgage for Ethan's house anyway. They must have co-signed on the loan, putting their own financial futures at extreme risk. Part of me felt a pang of worry for them, but a much larger part of me thought, you made your bed, now lie in it. It was their choice, their consequence. I truly believed the worst was over. I thought they had finally accepted my no and moved on, however grudgingly. Then came that Tuesday afternoon. The manila envelope. The civil summons. The realization that they hadn't moved on at all. They had escalated. They had taken our family drama and turned it into a public legal battle. Staring at the lawsuit in my kitchen, I felt a new kind of anger. A cold, sharp fury that burned through the shock. This wasn't just a misguided attempt to get money. This was a public declaration of war. They were trying to humiliate me, to legally force me into the role they had chosen for me. The family ATM. The claim of reimbursement for upbringing was so ludicrous, so insulting, it was clearly designed to cause maximum emotional damage. They were even trying to bill me for emotional support during adolescence. My first call was to Daniel. "You are not going to believe this," I said, my voice shaking with rage. I read the document to him. He was silent for a long moment, and then he just said, "Leo, you need a lawyer. Now." He was right. This was beyond my ability to handle. The next morning, I took a personal day off work and made an appointment with a family law attorney named Evelyn Reed. Her firm had stellar reviews online, and her profile picture showed a woman with a no-nonsense expression that I found incredibly reassuring. I sat in her polished conference room, the lawsuit spread out on the table between us. I told her everything. The history with Ethan, the family meeting, the pressure campaign, all of it. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable, occasionally jotting down notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she picked up the summons and read it over one more time. Then she looked up at me, a small, wry smile on her face. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice calm and confident. "In all my years of practice, I have seen some truly audacious claims. This is in the top 5. So, it's as crazy as I think it is?" I asked, needing to hear it from a professional. It's crazier, she confirmed. They have no legal standing. None. The law is very clear. Parents have a duty to support their minor children. There is no law that says children have a duty to repay their parents for the cost of raising them. If there were, the court system would collapse. She leaned forward. This isn't a lawsuit, Mr. Miller. This is a harassment tactic. It's a desperate and frankly pathetic attempt to bully you. And we are not going to let them win. For the first time since I'd opened that envelope, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had an ally. So what do we do? I asked. Evelyn Reed leaned back in her chair, her smile turning sharp. We fight back, she said. We don't just defend. We go on the offensive. They want to talk about financial support? Fine. Let's talk about financial support. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Under Evelyn's guidance, I transformed from a victim into a strategist. The mission was simple. Gather every piece of evidence that proved I had been anything but a deadbeat son. She wanted to build a counter-narrative so strong that my parents' lawsuit would look not just frivolous, but malicious. My first stop was my own financial history. I spent hours hunched over my laptop, digging through years of bank statements and credit card bills. I found the record of the $5,500 payment to Ethan's divorce attorney. I printed out the confirmation. I found the scanned image of the $7,200 check I'd written to his landlord. I printed that out, too. I even found receipts for groceries, kids' clothes, and movie tickets from the weekends I had my nephews. Felt petty, but Evelyn insisted. Every dollar counts, Leo, she told me. We're painting a picture. Next, I went through my text messages and emails. The pressure campaign from my extended family turned out to be a goldmine. Aunt Carol's guilt-tripping texts, Cousin Jessica's condescending messages, Uncle Don's sanctimonious email. Evelyn was ecstatic. This is perfect, she said, looking at the printouts. It shows a clear, coordinated effort to harass and intimidate you. It establishes their motive. The hardest part was deciding whether to involve my grandparents. My father's parents, Arthur and Eleanor, were the only members of the family who had remained neutral, which in my family was as good as being on my side. They were old school, people of principle, and I knew they would be horrified by what my parents were doing. But I hated the idea of putting them in the middle of this. I finally called them, my stomach in knots. I laid out the whole story, my voice cracking as I got to the part about the lawsuit. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Finally, my grandfather spoke, his voice gravelly with anger. That boy's father has lost his mind, he said, referring to my dad. To sue his own flesh and blood. It's a disgrace. My grandmother got on the line. Leo, darling, we are so sorry you are going through this. This is not how we raised your father. You have always been a good, responsible young man. Of course, we will support you. She paused. We'll be at the hearing. We want your father to see us sitting on your side of the courtroom. I hung up the phone, tears welling in my eyes. It was a small thing, perhaps, but their validation felt like a shield. It was a reminder that the word family wasn't completely broken for me. I wasn't fighting this battle entirely alone. Armed with a binder full of evidence and the support of the only family members who mattered, I felt ready. The fear and shock had been replaced by a steely resolve. My parents had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. They wanted to have their day in court? Fine. I would give it to them. The day of the court hearing was gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. I walked into the courthouse, my lawyer Evelyn by my side, a heavy binder of evidence tucked under my arm. The place smelled of old paper and stale coffee. It felt surreal, like I was walking onto the set of a TV show. We found our assigned courtroom. It was smaller than I'd imagined, all dark wood paneling and worn-out benches. My parents and Ethan were already there, sitting with their lawyer at the plaintiff's table. They looked stiff and uncomfortable in their Sunday best. My mother refused to look at me, staring straight ahead with a pained expression, as if she were the one being wronged. My father glared at me, his jaw set in a stubborn line. Ethan just looked like a lost puppy, completely out of his depth. Then I saw them. In the first row of the public gallery, sitting straight and tall, were my grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor. My grandmother gave me a small, encouraging smile. My grandfather just nodded, his eyes fixed on his son with a look of profound disappointment. My parents saw them, too. A flicker of shock crossed my mother's face before she quickly composed herself. Evelyn and I took our seats at the defendant's table. She gave my hand a reassuring squeeze under the table. "Deep breaths, Leo," she whispered. "Let me do the talking. The truth is on our side." The bailiff called the court to order, and a stern-looking woman in her late 50s, Judge Thompson, entered and took her seat at the bench. She had sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. My parents' lawyer went first. He was a slick, overly confident man who probably offered a discount for ridiculous cases. He launched into a rambling speech about the sanctity of family and the sacrifices his clients had made to give their son, Leo, a good life. He painted a picture of two loving parents who had poured their life savings into their children, only to be abandoned by their successful, ungrateful son in their time of need. He framed their need as helping their other son, Ethan, provide a stable home for their grandchildren. It was a masterful performance in emotional manipulation, and I could feel the judge's patience wearing thin. When he finished, Judge Thompson looked down at him over her glasses. "Counselor," she said, her voice dry as dust, "while your soliloquy on family values is touching, could you please point me to the specific legal statute that entitles parents to a $350,000 reimbursement for raising their own child?" The lawyer sputtered, flipping through his notes. "Well, Your Honor, it's not about a specific statute. It's about a principle of familial duty, of fairness." The judge was not impressed. She turned her attention to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, let me ask you a few questions." My parents sat up straighter. "Did you pay for your son Leo's college education?" she asked my father. "No, Your Honor," he mumbled. "He got scholarships." "I see. So he has been financially independent since he was 18. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you are not in financial distress yourselves? You are not suing him for your own support?" "No," my mother chimed in. "We just want a portion of what we invested in him back, to help our other son, Ethan, to help him pay the mortgage on his new house." The judge stared at them for a long, uncomfortable moment. The entire courtroom was silent. She seemed to be processing the sheer audacity of what they were admitting. Then Evelyn stood up. "Your Honor, if I may?" "Proceed, Ms. Reed." Evelyn walked calmly to the table and picked up our binder. "Your Honor, not only is this claim without legal merit, but it is a gross misrepresentation of the facts. The truth is, my client, Mr. Miller, has provided significant and repeated financial support to his brother and his family, out of the goodness of his own heart." She then presented the evidence. The bank statement showing the payment to Ethan's lawyer, the copy of the check for 6 months' rent, the receipts for groceries and children's essentials. With each piece of paper she submitted, I could see my parents shrinking in their seats. Their narrative of the ungrateful, selfish son was being systematically dismantled in front of a judge. But the final, devastating blow was yet to come, and it would come from the judge herself. After Evelyn presented her evidence, the courtroom was thick with a tense silence. The slick lawyer for my parents had nothing to say. There was no refuting bank statements and canceled checks. Judge Thompson looked at the evidence, then back at my family. Her gaze was sharp, analytical, and utterly devoid of sympathy. She took a long, deliberate sip of water. Then, she turned her attention to the one person who had been silent the whole time. "My brother, Mr. Ethan Miller," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Please stand." Ethan, startled, clumsily rose to his feet. He looked pale and nervous, a stark contrast to the confident golden boy I had grown up with. The judge peered at him over her glasses. "Mr. Miller, I have just reviewed evidence showing that your brother has paid for your divorce attorney, your rent, and various other expenses for your children. Your parents are here today, suing him for an additional $350,000, which they have stated is to pay the mortgage on a home they purchased for you. I have just one question for you. and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. "Do you, honestly and truly, believe that your younger brother should be held legally and financially responsible for your home loan?" This was it. The entire case, all the years of family dysfunction, boiled down to this one moment. Ethan had a choice. He could have shown a shred of humility. He could have admitted this had gone too far. He could have been a decent human being. He wasn't. He puffed out his chest, a flicker of the old entitlement returning to his eyes. "Well, Your Honor," he began, his voice whiny. "He can afford it. He makes a great salary and he doesn't have a family or kids. I do. It's not fair that he has so much and I'm struggling." The judge's face remained perfectly still, but a storm was gathering in her eyes. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She looked at Ethan, then at me, then back at Ethan. "I'm not married either, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "And I have no children. Should I be responsible for paying my clerk's rent?" Ethan's jaw dropped. He had no answer. He just stood there, mouth agape, as the absurdity of his own argument was laid bare for everyone to see. The judge let him squirm in the silence for a few more seconds before she brought down the hammer. "I have heard enough," she declared, her voice now booming with authority. "Case dismissed. With prejudice." She wasn't finished. She turned her steely gaze on my parents. "To the plaintiffs, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, let me be unequivocally clear. Parents are not entitled to reimbursement for raising their children. That is a fundamental tenet of our society. The fact that you would bring this claim to my court is an abuse of the legal system." She gestured to the evidence binder. "Furthermore, the evidence shows that your son, the defendant, has already provided you with more familial support than most parents could ever hope for. Your claim isn't just baseless. It's offensive." She stood up, her black robes making her seem 10 feet tall. "Frankly, I find your behavior to be brazen, manipulative, and profoundly disappointing. You are dismissed." With a final, sharp rap of her gavel, it was over. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I had won. The truth had won. I looked over at my family. My mother was openly weeping, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of humiliation. My father looked like he'd been slapped. Ethan just stared at the floor, utterly defeated. They had gambled everything on my sense of obligation, and they had lost spectacularly, publicly. This is the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally got control of my own life back. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You're awesome. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my ears as the courtroom began to empty. My mother, still crying, started to walk towards me, her hand outstretched. "Leo," she began. Before she could take another step, my lawyer Evelyn was standing between us. "I think you've said quite enough for one day, Mrs. Miller," she said coolly. I didn't even look at them. I just turned and walked towards the back of the courtroom where my grandparents were waiting. My grandmother wrapped me in a fierce hug, her small frame trembling slightly. "Oh, Leo," she whispered, "I am so proud of you for standing up for yourself." My grandfather put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, son," he said, looking past me to where my father was helping my mother out of the room. He didn't need to say anything else. I saw the shame and sadness in his eyes. Daniel was waiting for us in the hallway. He clapped me on the back. "Man," he said with a low whistle, "that was better than any TV show." The look on Ethan's face when the judge said that, priceless. We all went to a quiet diner nearby. The 4 of us, me, my grandparents, and Daniel. As we sat in a worn vinyl booth, eating burgers and drinking coffee, it struck me. This felt more like family than any holiday dinner or forced gathering I'd ever had with my parents. There was no agenda, no manipulation, just genuine care and support. My grandfather shook his head as he salted his fries. I don't know what happened to your father, he said, his voice heavy. We didn't raise him to be like this, to value money and appearances over his own son. It's the dynamic with Ethan, I said, finally able to put words to it. He's always needed to be the hero for Ethan, and when he couldn't be the hero financially, he tried to force me into that role. It's not your job to be anyone's hero, Leo, my grandmother said firmly, reaching across the table to pat my hand. It's your job to live your own life. We're just sorry it took something this drastic for you to finally be free to do it. We talked for hours, not just about the lawsuit, but about everything. My work, my plans for the future, Daniel's new puppy. It was normal. It was peaceful. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could just be Leo, not Ethan's responsible younger brother. As I drove home that evening, I felt a profound sense of lightness. The weight that I had been carrying on my shoulders for my entire life, the weight of their expectations, their approval, their conditional love was gone. The legal victory was satisfying, of course. But the emotional victory, the feeling of being seen and supported by the people who truly mattered, was what meant the most. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be completely smooth, but I also knew with absolute certainty that I would be okay. I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that the public humiliation of the courtroom would be a wake-up call for my parents. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would reflect on their actions, see the damage they had caused, and perhaps even feel a shred of remorse. That hope lasted exactly 1 week. I got a call from my grandmother. Her voice was strained, laced with a weary resignation that broke my heart. Leo, she said, I thought you should hear this from me before you hear it from somewhere else. What is it, Grandma? I asked, a familiar sense of dread creeping back in. Your father and mother came over to the house this morning, she explained. They were in a state. Your mother was crying, your father was angry. They told us that because of the legal fees and the new mortgage, they were in a difficult financial position. I stayed silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Leo, they asked us to give them an advance on their inheritance, she said, her voice filled with disbelief. They wanted us to change our will, to give them their share of our estate now so they could pay off the mortgage on Ethan's house. I slumped against the kitchen counter, the phone pressed hard against my ear. I wasn't even surprised. I was just numb. After everything that had happened, after a judge had publicly condemned their actions, their first thought wasn't to apologize or try to mend the relationship with me. Their first thought was to find another source of money. They had simply moved on to the next bank they could try to rob. The bank of Grandma and Grandpa. What did you say? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Your grandfather told them no, she said firmly. He told them that our will and our estate are our business, and we will not be bullied or guilt-tripped into liquidating our assets to bail them out of a mess of their own making. He told them they should be ashamed of themselves for even asking. How did they take it? Not well, she sighed. Your father stormed out. Your mother just cried and said we didn't understand, that we were choosing you over them. I hung up the phone, a cold, painful realization settling deep in my bones. It was never about me. My mother's tears in the courtroom, her pleas in the hallway, they weren't for the son she had lost. They were for the money she had lost. Her grief was financial. My absence in her life was a calculated loss, but the absence of my financial support was a tragedy. That was the moment I truly let go. It was the final confirmation that their love was, and always had been, conditional. It was tied to my utility, to my willingness to play my assigned role. And now that I had refused to play that role, I was no longer of any use to them. The pain of that realization was sharp, but it was also liberating. There was no relationship left to save. There was nothing left to mourn. There was only the future, and for the first time it was entirely mine. The year after the court case was like waking up from a long, suffocating dream. With the constant hum of family drama silenced, I could finally hear my own thoughts, my own desires. The freedom was exhilarating. The first thing I did was something I had put off for years because I was always saving for a rainy day, which I now realized was code for saving for the next family crisis. I bought my own place. It wasn't a big suburban house like the one they'd bought for Ethan. It was a modern, two-bedroom condo in a vibrant part of the city, with a balcony that overlooked a park. The day I got the keys was one of the happiest days of my life. I spent the first weekend just sitting on the floor of the empty living room, drinking a beer, and soaking in the silence. It was mine, every square inch of it. I hadn't inherited it, no one had given it to me, and no one could ever try to take it away. I threw myself into making it a home. I painted the kitchen a cheerful, sunny yellow, a color my mother always hated. I bought a ridiculously comfortable couch. I even adopted a cat from a local shelter, a little gray tabby I named Gus, who quickly became the master of the apartment and my constant companion. My life found a new, peaceful rhythm. My work at the tech company was going well. Without the constant stress at home, I was more focused, more creative. My boss noticed, and I ended up getting a significant promotion that came with a nice raise. I started hiking again on the weekends. I reconnected with old college friends. Daniel and I had a standing Thursday night tradition of grabbing pizza and watching bad action movies. I visited my grandparents every other Sunday. Our relationship deepened, free from the shadow of my parents. They told me stories about their youth, about how they met, about the struggles they'd overcome. I helped them with their yard work and set up their new computer. In their quiet, unwavering support, I found the unconditional love I had always craved from my parents. I heard bits and pieces about the rest of the family. Ethan had apparently struggled to keep up with the mortgage payments. The perfect house had become an anchor around their necks. He eventually had to rent it out and move back in with my parents, along with his two sons. The big house, the symbol of their grand plan, was now just a rental property they were barely breaking even on, while the four of them were crammed back into my childhood home. The irony was not lost on me. I never felt a moment of guilt. I had given them a chance to be a family. They had thrown it away in exchange for a deed to a house. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I chose peace. I chose sanity. I chose myself. And as I sat on my balcony with Gus purring on my lap, watching the sun set over the park, I knew I had chosen correctly. I was finally truly happy. I didn't know then that they had one last, desperate, unbelievably audacious card left to play. Just when I thought I had finally closed that chapter of my life for good, an email popped into my inbox. It had been almost a year since the court case, a year of blessed silence. I didn't recognize the address at first, but the subject line made my stomach clench. A family matter. I hesitated, my cursor hovering over the delete button. A part of me screamed not to open it, to just trash it and move on. But curiosity, that old, treacherous human impulse, got the better of me. I clicked it open. The email was from my mother. Her tone was completely devoid of the drama and emotion from our last encounters. It was brisk, practical, and utterly devoid of any self-awareness. It was as if the lawsuit, the courtroom, the judge's condemnation had never happened. It read, "Leo, I hope this email finds you well. We heard from your grandmother that you bought a new house for yourself. That's wonderful news. It must be nice to have so much space. As you may know, things here have been a bit difficult. Ethan and the boys are living with us, and the house is getting very crowded. It's not an ideal situation for raising two growing boys. Since you now have a two-bedroom home and you are living alone, it occurs to us that there is a simple and convenient solution for everyone. Ethan and the boys can move in with you. It would give them the space they need and would be much more convenient for everyone involved. Liam and Noah would love being in the city with their uncle. Let us know what day would be good for them to move their things in. We can start next weekend. Sincerely, Mom." I read the email once. Then I read it again. I had to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The sheer, unmitigated gall. The absolute, breathtaking audacity of it. After suing me for hundreds of thousands of dollars, after being publicly humiliated in court, after a year of complete silence, their first communication was a demand. Not a request, a demand. They weren't asking. They were informing me of the new arrangement. They had learned absolutely nothing. They still saw me, my home, my life as a resource to be allocated as they saw fit. They believed they still had the right to make decisions for me. For a moment, I felt the old anger flare up. I started typing a furious response, my fingers flying across the keyboard, listing every single one of their sins, every betrayal, every moment of pain they had caused me. And then I stopped. I looked around my quiet, peaceful apartment. I saw Gus sleeping in a patch of sunlight on the rug. I saw the yellow walls of my kitchen. I heard the faint sound of kids playing in the park outside. And I realized they couldn't touch this. They couldn't touch me. Their words, their demands, their insane logic. It had no power over me anymore. I deleted the angry draft. Replying with anger would mean they still had a hold on me. It would mean I was still engaged in their toxic game. The only way to win was not to play. I typed out a new response. It was short, calm, and final. Helen, I will not be hosting Ethan or the boys. This is not open for discussion. Do not contact me again. Leo. I hit send. Then I did something I should have done a year earlier. I created a filter to send any email from her address, or any variation of my family's names, directly to the trash folder, unread. I leaned back in my chair and took a long, deep breath. A genuine smile spread across my face. It was over. For real this time. I had sent my final message. I had built my final wall. And on the other side of it was peace. It's been a few years now since that last email. True to my word, I've had no contact with my parents or my brother. I don't know if they tried to reach out again. If they did, their messages were sent into the digital void of my trash folder. The silence has been profound, and in it, I have found a level of contentment I never thought possible. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my balcony in the evening, watching the city lights start to twinkle, I think about them. I don't feel anger anymore, or even sadness. I just feel a sense of distance, like I'm watching a movie about someone else's life. I see a family trapped in a cycle of entitlement and manipulation, unable to see beyond their own needs. I see my brother, forever a child in their eyes, never forced to truly stand on his own 2 feet. And I see my parents, who sacrificed a relationship with one son for the sake of enabling the other. They made their choices, and they are living with the consequences. My life, on the other hand, has blossomed. I'm still at the same company, now leading my own team. I eventually met someone wonderful, a woman named Clara who is kind and funny, and respects my boundaries as if they were the most natural thing in the world. She knows my story, and she loves me not in spite of it, but because of the strength it took to navigate it. My grandparents adore her. My relationship with my nephews, Liam and Noah, is more complicated. I send them birthday and Christmas gifts through my grandparents, making sure they know their uncle is thinking of them. I hope that when they're older, they'll understand. I hope they break the cycle. I learned a hard lesson through all of this. I learned that sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most can be the ones who hold you back the tightest. I learned that family is not an excuse for abuse or manipulation. And I learned that you have the right to walk away from people who consistently harm you, even if you share blood with them. The peace I have now wasn't given to me. It wasn't an inheritance or a gift. It was a choice. I had to fight for it. I had to go to war for it. I had to build it myself, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, because that struggle, as painful as it was, led me here, to this quiet moment, in this home that is truly my own, with a future that is bright and unbound. Some ties don't need mending. They need to be severed so you can finally be free. My only regret is that it took me so long to find the scissors. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a strange thing to share something so personal, but I feel it's important to talk about these things. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? I'd be genuinely interested to hear about it. Please, share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I share next. Take care.